chicken pot pie. So, to make chicken pot pie first, you have to start off with the chicken. And you're going to put it in the pot with some cold water, with some onions, some celery, some carrots and stuff like that, and boil it basically until it's more or less falling apart. So come here. It's better if you start with a whole thawed out chicken, because the internal will be frozen. It's a lot harder to cook. The outside will be done before the inside. That's kind of what the problem we had here was. We got it thawed pretty well, but the inside was still frozen. So I cooked it slower than I might have otherwise to kind of thaw it out and cook at the same time. But that leaves all those internal organs that are in the middle of the chicken in there, and that's what all this is broken down, and it kind of makes it a dirtier broth. But anyway, we cooked it till the chicken fell apart. I then picked the chicken. So we picked all the meat off of the chicken, and I always put the bones and skins and all back in there, and let that continue to cook down and get more chickeny. And so we're going to take this and dump it into the colander. I guess we can go ahead and do now. That can drain out into the pot that we have below it. I'll come back to that in a minute. In the meantime, I've gone ahead and cut up a little bit of garlic, but don't use much in this. Cubed some potatoes pretty small. Basically, you want all these things to be about the same size so that they cook evenly. So we got onion. I did a red potato instead of a russet potato because I left the skin on, and the skin's a little bit softer and not as chewy on these kinds, and then made the carrots about the same thickness as everything else. We'll cook that down until they're softened. I'll show you that in a minute. Then we'll put the broth in with the cooked vegetables and add these and thicken that broth with the cornstarch. So basically everything you do for the chicken pot pie is done ahead of time. And really the only reason you put it in the oven is to cook the biscuits. So we'll cook the vegetables next and talk about where we go from there. Alright, so I'll put those vegetables in the pot with some oil and just cooking them until they get soft. And then we'll see what that looks like. Also, I added some ground pepper. Just enough to dust the top pretty well, not too much. And I'm going to add some salt as well, maybe about a tablespoon. Okay, so that's about how much salt I put in it. Mom says it's a little much. I hope it's not too much. I'm going to put that in there with the pepper and stir it around. Get the vegetables until they're soft. Now I'm going to pour the broth on. Put the broth into this container, and a lot of times the broth will the fat will rise to the top, and you can scoop the extra fat off. This one didn't have a whole lot in it, so I'm not going to worry about that. This is 4 cups of the broth that we got from the chicken. Probably going to go a little bit more. Better to have more than less. So that's going to make about 6 total cups of broth, I guess. And that's going to be the beginning of the inside. So we'll just bring that to a boil. Then I'll mix some cornstarch with water or more broth and put it in there to thicken it up, and we'll see that step next. Okay, so now we have to thicken the broth. I've gone ahead and added the chicken in there. You can do it before or after, it doesn't really matter. I've got, I don't know, about a 1/4 cup or so of cornstarch. Doesn't really matter. You just need enough that's going to thicken. You can add water or water or chicken broth back to it.
It has to be cold.
But it does have to be cold. Water's just an easier thing to mix it with. So we've got a solution that's probably a little light, but it's okay. And then we're going to put it in here when it's boiling, and it will immediately start to thicken, so you want to be stirring all the time at this point. And I've poured all that in there. As it boils, it will thicken. And you can kind of decide if it's thick enough. So that's too thin, probably. So I'll just get a little more cornstarch, and we'll find out if that was good enough in the end. We'll put the biscuits on top, and that will actually soak up some of it, as Mom was pointing out. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. At this point, we can add in the frozen vegetables, and then we'll pour it into a 9x12 tray, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so we've poured it in here. You can see we filled it up to about, an inch from the top, and then layered the biscuits on it. We have more than enough to make a whole other container of it. So basically, we're at this stage. We put the biscuits on top. The oven is preheated to 350 degrees, and we'll put it in there and cook it, and when the biscuits are ready, the dinner's ready. Okay, so when everything is done, your biscuits will have expanded and filled up the space. They'll be golden brown on top. You'll have some bubbling from the heat of the oven for the stuff. It's also not a bad idea to put a cookie tray or something underneath to catch the overflow if it happens to overflow. But anyway, that's how we make our chicken box. Anyway. This will go on the blooper reel. Are we ready? Are we recording currently? That's sad. Anyway, so this is how we make our chicken pot pie.